Okay, so good afternoon, everybody from Athens. I'm very happy to see familiar faces from all over Southeast Europe, from Turkey, from The Hague, Charles, right?
Yes.
Mihailo from Serbia, Ionut from Bucharest, Romania, and John from the UK, from the border region, I understand. Okay, and so many others whom I cannot see their faces, but you, and of course you're Dakul. I can see you now. Okay, so we have a full party, and more people will join us in a few minutes. So welcome everybody to this first webinar of the season. I say first because I don't think there are going to be that many, maybe 2 or 3 during the year, because most activities now have come to their previous existence, which is in-person participation. But I feel that webinars are very useful, very easy to attend in the sense that we save time, very specific in terms of the subject matter, and it gives everybody some margin to express their views and ideas. So as the first webinar of the season, we decided in the executive committee to pick up geopolitics and the energy crisis in Europe. Now, we do not need a lot of imagination to think what has been happening and what is already happening right now. Some people are talking about, and I see a first page article in the Financial Times, we're saying the redrawing of the energy map. Others are talking about momentous changes in the global geopolitics sphere, and many other expressions to show that something really very important is happening at global level as far as energy and geopolitics are concerned. Obviously, most of us who follow this area for systematically, we have been aware of this for a few months, I would say even for 2 years. But we decided to leave this for a more ripe approach. So really after a year, the war in Ukraine, we think it's the right time now to reflect and see what has been happening and what is the impact on energy. And of course, the impact on energy is huge because we have seen things which we would not imagine, I would say 18 months ago. For example, Europe disengaging 2/3, I wouldn't say totally, but 2/3 from Russian gas, disengaging almost 100% from Russian oil. And you will say that Russian oil, that oil is much more versatile in terms of trying to find alternative suppliers because it's a very mature market. But gas is still building on, both in terms of pipelines and LNG. So the change here was very, I would say, spectacular. And other changes which have been happening in solid fuels, we have the return of coal for power generation, which was difficult to comprehend even 2 years ago. And we are noticing a more realistic approach from policy makers. For example, last Wednesday and Thursday, I was in Zagreb in Croatia because the US Department of Energy, in cooperation with the government of Croatia and other entities like the Atlantic Council, were organizing what they call PTAC. And PTAC is the Transatlantic Partnership on Energy. And we had very bold statements by the Secretary for Energy of the United States government, Jennifer Grantham, which for the first time emphasized the need of baseload. And as you know, we at ENF, for many years, we have been crying for baseload, how important and necessary is for the balance of our energy systems. And she went not once, 3 times in 3 different keynote speeches she delivered, putting a lot of emphasis on baseload and nuclear power as a clean energy source. Not only that, but she also made ample reference to oil and gas and how oil and gas technology is very important for the energy transition. So we see new groundbreaking at very senior energy policy level. And I think many of you are aware of other movements and other statements from other policymakers, especially in our region. So I will not waste any more of our precious time. I will pass on the floor to John Roberts, who I wish to thank once again for participating and for leading this, the first part of our webinar. And John, you have the floor.
Kostas, thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this and for inviting me to take part. I'm going to start with a brief sort of structural announcement that since Dr. Felix is not present right now, after I have spoken, would it be possible for Dr. Elinas to continue, because he will be in a good position to deliver a global overview, followed, if I may, by Dr. Yurdigal Yegudin, and then if we could have Professor Ionut Burica speaking, leaving the floor free at the end for Dr. Felix, if that's all right by you. As part of my...
Yes, John, we're fully in agreement on this, right?
My own introduction I'll keep short. I've been arguing for the last year and a half, we have 2 simultaneous crises. One is obviously the climate change, and that the solution is, in effect, get out of fossil fuels as quickly as possible. And then we have the Ukraine crisis and its consequence, and the solution for that, from a perspective of European countries at least, is get access to fossil fuels as quickly and as much as possible. So how do we deal with this paradox? Well, in part, and we've had an allusion from Jennifer Grantham on this, technology. We know that we are going to face another tough year on conventional energy supplies in Europe. That will be potentially particularly acute next winter, because last winter, the winter we've just come through, we still had a large amount of gas in storage as a result of early Russian deliveries in the first half of the year. But that will not be taking place in 2023. So unless we get another really mild winter, then we are likely to face gas shortages in Europe, not least because at the same time, 2022 saw a large number of LNG projects come online or be refurbished, and much less is due to come online in 2023. But if we can get through this winter, and the point, of course, is we have to get through the winter, everything has changed radically. We are seeing persistently the increase in efficiency in renewables and the way in which both the cost of renewables and the cost of storing energy is tumbling. In other words, we have a very tough year ahead of us, but after that, something that we would never have dreamed of will have taken place. There will have been a rupture between the biggest energy supplier and the biggest energy consumer, which will have caused pain, demand destruction, including loss of key economic sectors. But we will be back on a path of growth that is not based primarily on fossil fuels. That is a phenomenal revolution to happen so quickly. But as I say, that's a year or so away. The next year is going to be very difficult. And with that, if I may, I will hand over the chair or the speaking slot to Dr. Elinas, and good luck and good to see you.
Thank you, John. I will do a brief introduction about the world situation, talk a bit about Europe, and then end up with a presentation on the East Med situation. So the energy crisis is forcing governments to reconsider their priorities, with energy security and affordability coming to the top and climate change dropping down the list. That's what is happening globally, not necessarily in Europe, though. The energy squeeze on Europe caused by the energy crisis and the impact of sanctions on Russia as a result of the... is that okay? No, I'm not going to show the presentation because I also need to refer to my notes. As a result of this invasion of Ukraine has been relentless. And it may, even though the winter is mild now and things are good, as John said, it probably will get more difficult later in the year as we enter the next winter. With economic activity rebounding, China is providing additional competition in our already overstretched energy market. And in addition to that, the BP's new energy outlook, based on known trends and policies, forecasts that global gas demand will carry on growing, driven by Asia and not necessarily by Europe. Reflecting this, BP said that the scale of the economic and social disruptions over the past year associated with the loss of just a fraction of the world's fossil fuels has also highlighted the need for the transition away from hydrocarbons to be orderly, such that the demand for hydrocarbons falls in line with available supplies, not in anticipation of, avoiding future periods of energy shortages and higher prices. The reality is that global energy transition will take time. And let's talk a little bit about Europe, because with no end of the Russia-Ukraine war in sight, global energy markets will continue to be unstable, and Europe will be at the center of it. Accelerating Europe's transition to cleaner energy could provide the answers, but with intermittency still a problem, the road to cleaner energy will be long and arduous, with natural gas needed for a long time to come. Eventually, Europe must recognize this and accept that new long-term contracts, LNG contracts now, greater than 10 to 15 years will be required to justify the necessary investment in oil and gas infrastructure. And these will be essential. Europe needs a more secure supply strategy than just buying on the spot market with little control on prices and quantities. But right now, the EU is going in the opposite direction. I was reading an article today saying that the EU countries intend to push for a global phasing out of fossil fuels within their climate diplomacy this year, including a COP28. So Europe doesn't see gas as part of this future, which I think is going to be a fallacy. It's going to be a problem later on. 2022 was a wake-up call for Europe, with high energy prices leading to social unrest, despite paying over 800 billion euros on energy subsidies. Only by embracing social justice and meaningful democratic engagement can the EU accelerate and sustain climate transition and overcome its new trilemma, which is green transition, social justice, and democracy. In other words, the energy transition needs to be grounded in energy security, that is, adequate and reasonably priced supplies to ensure public support and avoid severe economic dislocations with the dangerous political consequences that can follow. After a difficult 2022, European gas market appears to have entered into a new phase, something that Bloomberg called a new energy normal. Gas prices are down from their peak, but Europe faces a long-term loss of competitiveness. Surely, this cannot be acceptable as the new energy normal, not as a future. Otherwise, Europe will disappear from the scene. The EU will have to secure gas at substantially lower prices than now. If the burden to EU households is to be reduced and to affordable levels, and industry's competitiveness is to be restored. It will also have to be dependable and reliable and not vulnerable to fast evolving global geopolitics. Maximizing production of European gas sources, such as the East Med gas, ticks all of these boxes. So let's talk a bit about the East Med. The geopolitics of the region are fast shifting, fast changing. The ramifications of the re-election of Netanyahu in Israel, heading a government that is now shifting far to the right, are still unclear. In Cyprus, the election of Nikos Christodoulidis as the new president will hopefully usher in a new era. The devastating earthquakes in Turkey earlier this month has made a difficult situation in the country much more challenging. Our minds are with those suffering. The consequences are still not clear, but they're already impacting Turkey's politics and forthcoming presidential elections. I'm sure Yortagul will talk to us about it later on. With uncertainties in global energy policy. Sorry? Oh. With uncertainty in global energy policy continuing, as Europe and the US continue to push for a faster energy transition, and elections in Cyprus, Greece, and Turkey, oil companies operating in Cyprus EZ are unlikely to announce any major new initiatives in 2023. Normal activities will continue, but no new major initiatives. Most activity in this Med will be in Egypt, where oil company interests will remain strong. Success with the new bidding rounds in Egypt will boost exploration. Chevron is planning appraisal drilling of Aphrodite this year, and I believe it will wait to see the results before it does anything with Aphrodite. And there are reasons, and I don't have enough time to explain them now, but we can discuss them later on. And even though Cyprus energy ministers keep talking about exports from Aphrodite to happen next year and next year and next year, it's a moving target. and not yet materializing. But the discovery of gas in block states at Zeus, at Kronos, and at Calypso provides other opportunities, with the possibility that any may link these gas fields to the Zohr facilities in Egypt for export to Damietta liquefaction and exports. But it remains to be seen. Evidently, the companies operating in Cyprus EZ are not rushing with any new commitments or investments at this stage. One project, though, that may proceed, may actually materialize, is a proposal by Energean to bring gas to Cyprus, bring an existing FLNG, liquefy that, and export it to Europe and others. But Energean needs to discover more gas. It doesn't have enough gas to support the project yet. Apart from the need for oil company commitment, the development of Cyprus gas fields requires a change of policy by the EU regarding the future use of gas in Europe. Even though it is looking for new supplies in the short term to 2030 to replace Russian gas, the longer-term future remains uncertain. The EU is still pushing for getting rid of gas altogether, and last year it managed to reduce gas consumption by 13%, and it intends to carry on doing that. This discourages European utilities from entering into long-term gas purchase contracts that are needed to encourage development of new gas fields that require 20+ years of exports. But I believe that the unreliability of renewables may eventually force the EU to reconsider this. Cyprus also must prepare the ground to make this possible. An obstacle to developing Cyprus gas fields is the geopolitical risk associated with the unresolved Cyprus problem and Turkey's continuous threats. With elections in Cyprus, Greece, and Turkey ushering in new governments by the summer of this year, the second half of the year will be the right time to redouble efforts to overcome these obstacles. Turkey's priority will be to tackle its catastrophic economic problems, something that will require the goodwill, cooperation, and support of Europe and the US. Readiness by Cyprus to enter into meaningful discussions to resolve the Cyprus problem will help. A cooperative approach by all is the one most likely to produce the best possible results. Preparing the ground also includes concluding the discussions with Israel regarding the Aphrodite-Ishael unitization dispute. But with changes in government in both Cyprus and Israel, this may have to wait until the second half of 2023 at the earliest. And concluding with prospects for developing Cyprus EEZ being low in 2023, the new president must prioritize development of renewables from the currently low levels. The construction of the Euro-Asia interconnector, expected to begin by the summer, would be of great help. John, that's my presentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
I've got one question to ask you. What do you make of the European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic's assertion on the 2nd of March that the EU is now looking at joint purchasing of gas and that 22 countries are interested and that they might be involved in buying as much as 17 BCM of gas a year?
Well, they have actually progressed that now, and they are about to start doing it. It's not just an assertion, it's a plan being put in action. I think it's a sensible move, John, but it will not solve by itself Europe's problems. And it remains to be seen how far it goes, whether it succeeds or not. The response of sellers remains to be seen. The major sellers of gas would like to see long-term contracts. I don't think the European Union is ready to provide that. But the initiative itself may produce some small degree of success.
Thank you. I think you've also given a very nice introduction to our good friend, Dr. Yerguldin, the former economic advisor and leader at the OSCE. So Dr. Yerguldin, the floor is yours and very welcome, and all our best wishes for you and the family and everybody who has suffered the horrors that Turkey has gone through in recent weeks as a result of the earthquakes.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Since Charles touched upon the ISMET issues, I will be more global and at the end give a short picture from Turkey. First of all, we can comment to EU for successful management of the year 2020 with a lot of demand reduction and coming from the consumers, additional LNG supplies from US mainly, and some additional pipeline gas from Norway, Algeria, and Azerbaijan helped in this regard to reduce imports from Russian Federation, plus to fill the storage. As you mentioned rightly, John, 23 will be a more challenging year. There are a lot of efforts in the world to overcome the crisis situation. United States tried to supply Europe with more LNG, also encouraging to use more LNG. We saw in this regard, Germany, it was quite hostile towards LNG. Within the short time, they are implementing 5 facilities in this regard. US also increased the efforts to produce more gas by the private sector, by fracking. Also, there were huge sales from the US strategic reserves last year, about 180 million barrels of oil. And this year, the United States will sell again about 26 million tons of oil from April till June, and will reach the lowest level of strategic reserves since 1983. United States also eased sanctions on Venezuela, allowing Chevron to produce again in the country, and also allowed the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Shell to develop the offshore Dragon gas field of Venezuela between the two countries. Let's see how it's going forward. We see enormous investments, LNG investments in Qatar. So they intend to, they're implementing to increase their production from 77 million tons per year to 110 million tons per year. This is a real investment. If we look at globally, United Arab Emirates also investing in this regard in the Fujairah field, so they will increase their LNG capacity from 6 to 10.8 million tons per year. This is a smaller producer, but it is helpful. In this regard, they are also, we have Caspian region. John, you know very well, Azerbaijan had potential in Absheron field operated by Total, by Azeri-Chirag Güneşli deep section development, Shah Deniz 3 phase, and Umit and Babek field from Sokar could be developed. except Umid Fields, they are all international investors are involved in the other 3 fields. Iraq is still hopeful resource. Since 20 years, I keep saying we will soon see the Iraqi gas arriving, pipeline gas arriving in the Turkish network. And in this regard, United States could play an important role, naturally, to bring together KRG and the central government in Baghdad to finalize the negotiations on oil and gas law. And I think there are enough parties interested to develop the gas fields and supply some additional pipe gas to the Turkish network. It's only 35 kilometers from Doğu to reach the Turkish network. Let's see how it works. We should also question whether United States is really interested for additional pipeline gas coming to Europe. Turkmenistan plays big but loses. This was also in the past. They want to have large-scale sales and purchase agreements, and nobody is ready to do so. And so we can expect only that there will be some swaps via Iran to the Azerbaijan network to support the internal demand of Azerbaijan. EU Commission and Germany are on the shopping tour, both in the Gulf region and in the Caspian region. By EU visits, it looks like more lip service, because this type of MOUs were also signed in the past. The late days of the Nabucco project, huge statements were made, but it didn't work well. And Germany is visiting all the Gulf countries. Chancellor Scholz was in Iraq, and in this regard, Germany is really active to make some resources available to supply Germany with natural gas. Certainly, all these efforts, I miss that there is no consultation with Turkey. This happened also in the past, was not successful. If they want to bring nearly this pipeline gas to Europe, they should early enough consult with Turkey. Otherwise, this will end up like by Nabucco. When we look to Turkey, last year the demand was a little bit by natural gas lower than 2021. So it's 4 billion cubic meters less the demand. But on the other side, there are interesting developments in Turkey, as you may know. One is the Black Sea development in Sakarya deep offshore field. But I heard today that there will be a delay by supply of gas. Instead of end of March, maybe it will take 1 month more, because a lot of staff left for the earthquake regions to help their relatives. Secondly, Turkey signed with Oman sales and purchase agreement for additional LNG. And thirdly, the suggestion from Putin to develop a hub in Turkey. Everybody knows that I'm a staunch supporter of the liberalization of the Turkish gas market, and the governments were not very friendly in this regard. And I hope, even if it comes from Putin, as it works as a carrot, then it will be helpful for whole region, because Turkey is a natural hub with so many sources arriving in Turkey in this regard. And Turkey has the first exchange, natural gas exchange, established back in 2018, and successful operations in this exchange till end of last year. 7.4 billion cubic meters trade were realized. So I will sum up here, and if there are questions, we can continue later. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to ask any questions because we're very short on time. So I'm going to go straight, if I may, to Professor Ionut Purica, who is an advisor with the Romanian presidency on energy and is, of course, an advisor on specifically as well on nuclear issues. So Professor Purica, the floor is yours, and welcome here.
Thank you. It's Purica. Romanian is a Latin language, actually.
I apologize.
So the idea is, thank you. Allow me first to thank the organizers for putting us together and giving the opportunity to express a few ideas. Actually, I think that history is somehow going in a spiral, and we are now in a period of values changing, like Galileo and Giordano Bruno times, you know. For 80 years almost since the Second World War, 3 generations almost were educated that market is solving everything, we should trust the market and so on. Yes, that is true, but in conditions of peace, not during war. When the Germans attacked Great Britain, there was immediately a reshuffling of the market because they were at war and resources were actually managed in a different way. I've been looking at the evolution of GDPs, for example, and if you look at the autumn of 2021, the GDP of Russia increased a lot because they actually manipulated the market of gas in Europe and got more money to finance the coming at that moment military, what they call it, special operation, the invasion of Ukraine. Actually, after the European Union sanctions got into place, and not only European Union, but United States, NATO country in a single word or in 4 letters, the GDP of Russia went down, but at the same time, the increase of GDP of European Union actually was smaller because they were, we were actually coming into a sort of a hybrid economic war, except for the military, God forbid to extend that to other countries. What actually is happening is that is changing the distribution of values. I was a member of the advisory group for energy of the European Commission some time ago and involved in 3 main strategies of energy. One was emissions, so targeting the environment, regardless, call it Green Deal, call it Fit for 55, it's the same thing, same concept, reduce emissions. The other one was energy security, and the third one was energy innovation. Actually, what is happening nowadays is the change of context, the reshuffling of resource fluxes in the world due to the fact that European Union, at least Germany and Central Europe, were very much dependent on Russian gas, not only Germany, also Finland, Slovakia, and so on. Things are changing right now. Everybody is going for new type of resource fluxes, be they gas from liquefied from the States due to new technologies of gas extraction, shale gas and so on, be they gas from Qatar, and if the economy of China is starting again and Japan will need more gas, actually it's a question of competition of this type of resources. It's very clear that, at least to me, that what is happening right now is putting new priorities on the three strategies of the European Union. Climate change, yes, it's important. We need to go zero emissions in 2050 or 2030 or whatever. But the thing is not so important now because it comes to energy security, and resources are sought for in a different way. And in order to be able to play with resources, you get to go to new resources, and that is done only with innovation. It's new technologies are coming in. In nuclear, IASA, International Institute for Applied System Analysis, Marchetti, actually I've been working with him a time ago, said that there is a cycle of 55 years for new technologies and so on. If you look at nuclear, back in the 60s, there were plenty of small and medium, small reactors that were developed, especially in the United States, even put on some ships and so on. And now we are back to SMR, small, medium, modular reactors, because we are now needing new technologies. We are having a very developed mode on fusion energy. Everybody's for fusion now, Chinese, UK, United States, Koreans, Japanese, and so on. And even we are trying to improve the motors of our rockets, actually promising reaching Mars in 45 days instead of 3 months. All this is actually something that comes out now into a new type of technology and a new type of approach to what we want from our relation with the environment. It's not only emissions. Emissions is just a parameter. We are coming into a world with not only one parameter, that means a linear development, but several parameters. And we are now coming into circular economy, resource recovery, and changing liabilities into assets in resource management due to new technologies, energy storage. We were taught in universities or in polytechnical institutes that energy cannot be stored. You have to consume it as you generate it. Now, technologies for energy storage are developed, and we are changing the way our systems, our technology, or management, dispatching of our system works. At the same time, we are going into the need to stabilize the operation of energy systems, and that requires not only country by country, economy by economy markets that are interconnected, NTSOA in Europe and so on, but we need to develop regional cooperation. Regional cooperation, for example, in Southeast Europe, playing with baseload power and peak power and so on. Finally, it's a question of, let me say, a heresy, just to show that we have to get out of the box that we've been developed and put in, as I said, in the last 80 years, 77 years. How about, there are two big problems in Europe. One is Europe needs gas in winter to heat. That's the main use of gas in the European Union. And the other one is security. We don't want to depend on the Russian gas. but at the same time, we are trying to suppress a natural mechanism of temperature increase. So how about emitting more CO2? Temperature will increase, European Union will become a warmer region, and we don't need gas, Russian gas to heat. Obviously, the costs of this type of policy are unbearable. Italy will become a desert and Lapland will become a wine producer. And since I don't trust wine producing in Lapland, I don't recommend this type of policy. But I'm actually saying this metaphorically because we need to go into new type of even market organization, make the market more resilient, make reactions and educate a new generation of youngsters that will actually understand better and think not only on one parameter, but even on at least two parameters. And the moment you go for two parameters, you get into catastrophe theory, René Thoms, you know, you get into discontinuous behavior, you get into sudden change. On a small change on one parameter, you get a completely different pattern of behavior. So these are the things that I think we are actually facing now. I hope for my heresy, I won't be burned in the market in Rome, like Giordano Bruno, but you know, we need to somehow, we are in front of a new type of logistic penetration, of a new type of mentality, and that thing has got to be somehow to get us aware that we are there, and to get us out of the tradition, not only forget the tradition, but try to understand what is happening. These are the main things, main ideas that I wanted to throw out and to have some food for thought in the future. Thank you. I can't hear you. Okay. There's something wrong. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I've been muted, that's why. Thank you for Giordano Bruno. I need a conversation with you about it. Also, I don't want climate change to increase the temperature, or else my supplies of Romanian Pinot Noir start to deteriorate. Meanwhile, can I please pass the floor on to Konstantinos Pidis, who I'm hoping is now present and can come and do the summing up for this session. He's not here. Then in that case, we can ask some questions, and there are some key questions to be asked. The first I was going to ask to Professor Yagudin, Dr. Yagudin, which concerns the whole question of gas from Iraq, and you said it needed American intervention because it's been on the table for 20 years, it's coming in only 2 or 3 years. We all know the people who've made those comments, who promised that they would deliver, and delivery never came. Now, do you actually think that it is possible that we are now going to see gas from presumably northern Iraq, but also perhaps from federal Iraq, reaching Turkey in the near future? Do you think that the US will back that? And do you think that there is a likelihood of proper talks with Ankara that this should happen?
Thank you, John. I don't see there are enough efforts in this regard. There are supportive activities that US or European companies get contracts to install some electricity generation facilities using associated gas, especially in the south. But I think US wants to keep good relations to both KRG and central government and don't want to be involved in this regard very much because to contain the influence of Iran in the region is their main priority, it seems. Otherwise, there is plenty of gas in the south in form of associated gas still flaring, and there are difficulties in power supply because this gas is missing to produce electricity. On the other side, on the north, there is only one field producing at the time being, the Hormor field. There is nearby Jamal field, can be developed and supplied easily. It's very close. Two other fields in the north, I have to mention with sour gas, Miran and Binabavi fields, and they could be also a potential source supplying pipeline gas. Turkey is also in limbo in this regard because there's an ongoing arbitration between the central government, oil authorities and Turkey because of some supplies of the KRG from the past. So I don't see any other option than US helps them to have a win-win situation both for KRG and central government. Otherwise, this will go on like this.
Thank you. I've got one quick question for Dr. Parikka, which is, you mentioned the increased competition for resources. Was that a specific reference to the return of China as, well, the return of China to significant growth of energy imports?
Actually, what is happening now is that China, I think it's also a question of planning. United States are planning on quarters. China is planning on generations. In the last generation of 30, 35 years, the Chinese have absorbed all the technologies of production of the world. And actually, what they are now doing, and I'm saying that after in 2019, I was invited as a speaker in a big conference on innovation in Nanjing. China is starting to innovate. There is a new cycle of innovation. Let's not talk about powder, printing, silk, various other things, but about quantum computers, fusion, hyper velocity airplanes on rockets and so on. China is innovating again, and that is something that is actually shifting the resources in the world. Of course, it's not only China, but they are now coming strong on new technologies. United States is doing something very intelligent from its own startup in 1776. They are developing technology, and DARPA and NASA and so on are actually the United States government, federal government, developing new technologies. In Europe, it's now starting to develop that. European Commission was not keen on new technologies. European Commission was keen on market mechanism or other things like that. The big companies were developing technologies. So when I say resources are changing, yes, and the flux of resources and the importance of resources Yes, actually, that we are now in a change of let's say ideas generations in the world, and some ideas are coming. We don't need monks to get silkworms into their sticks to bring silk manufacturing to Europe, but now it's a question of China inventing things again, being a little advanced toward other parts of the world. So it's important to keep the cooperation going.
John, I'd like to, before we break up for the second session, may I add something to what Dr. Yeguden said? Yurda Kul, hi. I was very glad that you brought up the natural gas issue and the need for the gas market to be liberalized in Turkey. I think this is highly important at this stage, even more, because if the market is liberalized in Turkey, then gas could flow much easier to Europe through Turkey. And I think now with the gas coming up from the Black Sea, Turkey's position will become stronger in this respect. I think Bulgaria has managed to take advantage of that by organizing a long-term contract supply with Turkey. So Bulgaria now has two contracts, one with Turkey and one with Greece. So we can see how gas cooperation is bringing around countries around the same table. And I think that's very important. I think the European Union is not acting to its full capacity, let's say, by marginalizing Turkey in this respect. Politics apart, I think Turkey's role in providing adequate energy to Europe is very important and is not appreciated that much. And in that sense, I think, as you said, that there has to be closer cooperation between Turkey and the EU. But this will be facilitated once Turkey decides to open up its gas market.
I think that makes eminent sense. And I would be surprised if anybody in this audience or panel would disagree. The question is, how do you get the Turkish government on side on this side?
Right.
Now, I think I should say we've come to the end. Charles, I'm going to be quite firm and say no, because we've reached the end of our time limit. And I know that Dr. Tsamboulis wants to have a 2-minute break before the next session starts to set everything up. Right. So can I thank you very much, Dr. Elenas, Dr. Yegudin, and Dr. Parika for such an informative discussion. Thank you.
And thank you, John, also for very expertly moderating this first session. Thank you, really. And we look forward to meeting you in Thessaloniki in May.
A pleasure.
All right. So I suggest we have 1 or 2 minutes break before John Psaropoulos takes over as moderator of our next session. And may I remind you that in the next session, we're going to have with us Slavcho Neikov from Sofia, Eugenia Guzilova from Romania, and Mihailo Mihailovic from Serbia, and of course our own Christos Dimas. So 1 minute, take a breath, and John will start, right? Okay.
Good evening to everyone from me also. I'm John Psaropoulos, Al Jazeera's correspondent in Athens. I believe we're now joined by Mr. Christos Dimas, the chairman of the Geopolitics Committee at INE, also by Evgenia Gusilova, who is director of the Romania Energy Center, and also by Mihailo Mihailovic, independent consultant and INE's energy partner, consultant partner in Belgrade in Serbia. We're waiting for our input from Bulgaria, Slavcho Nekov. But I'd like to set things out like this. We've got a situation where after the 2009 Ukraine natural gas crisis, in which there was a cutoff of supply that affected Southeast Europe more than any other region, we've got now a situation where a lot of preparation has been done to provide alternative supply. Greece is now importing almost all of its natural gas and other energy requirements by sea through LNG terminals. Bulgaria will, by the end of this year, be receiving approximately 3 billion cubic meters a year from equally Greece and Bulgaria and Turkey. Romania is less vulnerable to market shocks because it is a producer that covers much of its own natural gas supply, but is still an energy importer. And Serbia seems to be the most vulnerable country in Southeast Europe, with little native energy sources other than coal, which is supposed to be phased out. And so I'd like to begin, if I may, by asking Mihailo Mihailovic, is he with us?
Just unmute.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Mr. Mihailovic, your country is, I think, for two reasons, more interesting in a way geopolitically, partly because it's targeted by Russia for influence purposes. Russia wants Serbia to continue to remain dependent on Russian natural gas, but also because you have no access to the sea. You are more dependent on your neighbors to supply you with alternative sources of gas. Can we begin with a sort of tour of the horizon and tell us how you see the energy vulnerabilities of Serbia at the moment?
Generally, first of all, thank you for participating in this event and this webinar. And for this purpose, I prepared some sort of presentation. And if you allow me, I would start that presentation with explanations which are part of that explanation is the question you already put to me. Or should I put that presentation later on?
No, please go ahead with your opening presentation.
Okay, I'll do. Is that correct? Okay. First of all, I want to express my condolences to the Greek people regarding the train accident near Larissa. It's a sad situation that the young people died in a train between Athens and Thessaloniki. The second thing, at the same time, I would like to express a sadness and compassion in the occasion of extremely heavy earthquake that produced tragic victims in Turkey and Syria. As you see, I prepared some sort of presentation that deals with the situation in Serbia and partially in Western Balkans region, and that shows some geopolitical pressures in the lives of those countries and nations. As you know, the main and long-term strategy decision is for Serbia and strategic goal for Serbia and other Balkan or Western Balkan countries to access to European Union, there are two problems that are products of direct external geopolitical influences. For Serbia, the first one is a normalization of relations with province of Kosovo. And the second one is, as you mentioned, a redefinition of relations with Russia according to the West dictate and some sort of pressure. Although these two cases are geographically and historically different, they have an impact on each other because the two great powers are the main protagonists of these problems we are experiencing. In Serbia, there is a huge social dialogue and debate on all sensitive geopolitical issues, primarily due to solving the problem of province of Kosovo and the global war in Ukraine. I would like just to inform you that Serbia remained open to all media outlets, all media channels of both the West and the East, including those banned on the West. I promise that in my presentation, I don't want to upset anyone or hurt anyone's feelings, but I will try to explain the situation and factography. This is just like a content of my presentation, general content, but you can see later on how it looks like. This is a European Union, and in the heart of Balkans, there is a yellow mark, which is possible candidates for a European Union, including the Ukraine, Moldova, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is the latest candidate. I would like to tell you just a few things about Serbia actual state of play, about relatively credible economic macroeconomic data like a growth rate, like a public debt and unemployment rate and so on. And our actual inflation is around 15%, which is mostly important by buying energy all over the place. Also, I would like to inform you that in addition to several thousand refugees from Middle East, about 30,000 Russians and about 26,000 Ukrainians came to Serbia and settled here. And one more information that of the European countries, only Serbia and Turkey still maintain regular commercial air traffic with Moscow. On the next slide, I would like to explain you some little bit about the energy situation, which is a pretty stable, but energy security is our top priority in Serbia, not only last year, but this year too. As you know, our general energy import dependency ratio is around 35% in comparing with Europeans who are in the range of 55 up to the almost 60%. Our dependency is 90% in oil and gas from Russia, as you said, and at the same time, we are in some way self-sufficient in the production of electricity. As you know, power production in Serbia relies on low calorific coal. Due to problems we had with the surface mining of lignite, Serbia was forced to import the coal from the neighborhood and even from Indonesia. Me, in my decades of experience, I could not imagine the absurd or paradox that Serbia imports a coal from Indonesia and that just 200 kilometers away in Kosovo, there are deposits of lignite for the next 300 years. This is a real example of geopolitics in action, geopolitics fraction, whatever. In natural gas, Serbia is still reliant on Russian natural gas for another 3 years over the Turkish Balkan Stream pipeline. It is a national interest of Serbia. We made a long-term agreement with Russians for the next 3 years, in comparing like Hungarians made with Russians a 10 years long-term agreement for gas supplying. The supply and reserves of oil and refined products are stable, even though the EU sanctions, like we, like a candidate, also experienced some sort of sanction. That part of sanction prohibit us from importing Russian oil. So Our main supplier for now is Iraqi oil, and so on. The next slide is talking about Serbia relations with the EU, like relations with other countries who are attempting to be part of European Union. You know that Serbia's political and economic problems are very different than the other Balkan countries. We are not member of NATO. We are not imposing sanctions to Russia. We have strategically good relations with China and other BRICS countries. Of the 6 countries of Western Balkans, 2 of them, Serbia and Montenegro, have begun negotiation for almost 2 decades. Albania and Macedonia for only 6 months. And the crisis in Ukraine helped Bosnia and Herzegovina become a candidate under the urgent procedure in December 2022. The process of accession to European Union are burdened by political demands and pressure for a long time. First, it used to be Hague Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Now is recognizing the Kosovo and Metohija like independent state. Third one is imposing some sanctions to Russia, and so on. The biggest Serbia political and economic problems are very different than the other Balkan countries. The main regional problem is normalization with the province of Kosovo. And we used to experience the question standards or status. What principle is the first? In negotiation process for normalization relation between Pristina and Belgrade, the Serbian and European sides, European Union sides, first demanded the establishment of standards, while the Albanian side exclusively demanded the issue of status. For us, Kosovo is a fiction state for many reasons, but primarily historical. Territory of Kosovo has never in history had administrative forms of statehood or any organization of society. Kosovo today is some sort of protectorate by USA and EU alliance. In the interpretation of international law, what takes priority? The integrity and sovereignty of the recognized state, or the rights to self-determination or succession of individual parts. You can think about that and how to explain the referendums and the wishes of the people in Scotland, in Catalonia, for example. It's very interesting for me, I would like to tell you, the 2 main EU negotiators in this process, Mr. Borrell and Mr. Lajčák, who are EU officials in Brussels, are imposing Kosovo independence on Serbia by the newest EU proposal, while their domicile countries, Spain and Slovakia, have not recognized Kosovo independence. It's funny, but that's a fact. About Kosovo, through history, never be part of Albania, nor was it ever independent. It was a part of Serbia, of Serbian states, and Serbs left their cultural mark there more than any other people who live there. Kosovo for Serbia is like a Plymouth Rock to Americans. It's a Jerusalem like to Israeli and Palestinians, or Giza to Egyptians. Serbia doesn't fight for Kosovo out of spite, but because Kosovo represents what Serbia is. And in actual situation, more than 80% in different polls for years, 80% of Serbian citizens do not want to join the EU if the condition is to surrender of Kosovo. In the next slide, I would like to go a little bit on a global or European problems. And you can see that since 1994, NATO increased its membership with 14 new European countries on the eastern part of Europe. 10 years ago, when the war in Ukraine just began, it appeared to be a short-lived regional conflict. Confirmed by declaration by the heads of state of the Russian Federation, Ukraine, France, and Germany Minsk Agreement 1 and 2 were adopted in the United Nations Security Council by Resolution 2202 in 2015 in order to implement peaceful settlement in eastern Ukraine. If the Minsk agreements had been respected and implemented, if Ukraine had remained neutral, if there had been no harassment, abuse, and killing of the population in eastern Ukraine, this war would not have happened. Historically, as you are aware, USA has protected its national security and economic interests by waging war in many countries around the world: Vietnam, Iraq, Kosovo, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, you name it. In the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the West has reached the Russian border without respecting Russia's national security interest. This is for Russia existential war, and they are ready to go to the end of their capabilities. For us in Serbia, it's tragic that two Orthodox nations are at war, and both are friendly nations to Serbia, and both are not recognized Kosovo, which is our meta problem. By the end of this war, no one will gain anything, neither Russians nor Ukrainians. The West will have the biggest gain. That is why it's clear to everyone that the West does not want a ceasefire and peace. In the next slide, I would like to show you that in addition to such political leaders who lead the world we live in today, world humanity also has intelligent people who are engaged in politics and politic activism. Many old men, I would like just to remind you, political veterans, wise people spoke much earlier about the risk of expanding NATO towards Russia. They suggested that Ukraine should follow the Finnish model of neutrality, like Henry Kissinger, George Kennan, Noam Chomsky, Jürgen Habermas, or even Zbigniew Brzezinski. Could you imagine that no Russian leader, no matter who he is, would tolerate Ukraine becoming a member of a hostile military alliance? In that way, what would happen if Mexico or Canada joined the Warsaw Pact on some point of time? Generally, the escalation of the war is not only planned in Moscow, and war should not be seen only through the prism of victory or defeat. A war against a nuclear superpower is generally unwinnable. In sabotaging the Nord Stream pipelines, only one country has the motive and ability to do it, a diversion that met the goals of the United States. In order to summarize, I would like to mention a few things about United Nations. The rules on which the international order are based are laid in a charter of the United Nations. That charter contains one big rule and one big mechanism for enforcing. It is a rule against aggressive warfare by one state against another. The mechanism for enforcing it is the Security Council. If we look back over the post-Cold War area period, which great powers have broken those rules? The most obvious examples are Kosovo and Iraqi wars in 1999 and 2003, waged without Security Council approvals. That is generally my presentation. And in the end, I would like to tell you some sort of determination of Serbian people that Russia, with its heritage, with knowledge, with technology, energy, and culture, is an inseparable part of European civilization. And I have the impression that there is a lack of courageous and sober political leaders in Europe and in the Balkans, and most of those guys expect a final showdown between the great powers. Thank you for your attention. That's my general presentation. We can continue to discuss. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mikhailovich. Because it's now 28 minutes past. Let me move on to Romania, to Evgenia Gusilova, so that we can have her opening remarks as well. And then we can come back and look at the different perspectives on the geopolitical environment that really dominates the energy discussion in this region. And Mr. Mikhailovich, I think you correctly identify the war in Ukraine, but also the perception in parts of Eastern Europe that it is the West which behaves aggressively, with reference to the bombing of Serbia in 1999. Now the action in Ukraine appears to reinforce that from a certain point of view. But let's go for a different perspective to Mrs. Gusilova.
Thank you. I would like to thank the moderator for the opportunity to speak. I also am glad to see many colleagues and friends, Kostas Stambolis, Charles Zelinas, Mr. Yurdukal. I had a different maybe setup in my mind of things that I want to touch upon, and I will touch upon those as well. But given Mr. Mikhailovich's previous presentation, I may start from, from some of the things that he presented so that we make this interesting. And I would like to start by saying that, Romania too is an Orthodox country, just like Greece, just like Russia, just like Ukraine. But it's strange for us to hear, that this NATO is a hostile military alliance. Romania is part of NATO, and we wish, no war. And we are absolutely appalled and, by this war that has started. And I think that we should be very, very careful when we discuss geopolitics to not blame the victim more than the aggressor. And it is very clear who the aggressor is in this case, and it is Russia. So by saying this, I would like to move to the energy side of the presentation. Romania, and not only Romania, let's say Europe, Southeast Europe, we have, I think, transitioned unexpectedly well this energy crisis. The expectations were that, it will be very difficult this winter. And now winter is almost over, and we find ourselves in this somehow sweet spot. The prices at the pump are not as high as they could have been. The prices of the electricity, in our electricity bills are manageable in Romania, at least I speak, because we have had these subsidies that were given to the electricity and natural gas prices. So in Romania, the consumers will be under this glass shelter, this glass, let's say, device. I mean, we are sheltered from the real market. And this has to do with what my colleague from Romania in the previous panel, Mr. Furica, has said, that yes, we have moved from a normal time economy to war logic and wartime economy. But I think, unlike Mr. Furica, that in spite of all the subsidies and the protection measures that should have been taken, we have to be also very careful as to not lose touch completely with the market, because we would like to have a market to come back to once this crisis is over. So we should not destroy the market completely through too much state intervention. Now moving to the exciting things that are happening or may happen in Romania. I think that this year we will definitely see a decision or a final investment decision on the Neptune Deep offshore gas field. Why am I saying this? Because we have already seen OMV Petrom budgeting, so earmarking money for the development of this field. So that tells me that they are preparing to go ahead with this project. It has dragged so on, as you know, 11 years almost, so that I don't think they can kick this further down the road anymore. So they will probably take a decision this year. In terms of gas, it's very interesting because, Romania is part of this rich club, the EU, the global north, so to speak, but we are located in the south of this rich club. So that means, yes, that means that we are squeezed somehow between the imperatives of the global north and the imperatives of the global south. So the global north is preoccupied with climate change, energy transition, moving away from coal. But the global south is preoccupied from moving from firewood and biomass to oil and gas and fossil fuels. So we are right in between of these trends, because we have still a significant part of the population that hit themselves with the poor man's means. That means, waste and firewood largely. So we have to transition these people out of poverty, and that means more use of natural gas for heating, but we also have to implement the policies of the European Union, which wants us to have more renewables in heat generation, right? So Romania is this perfect example of how we try to do both things at the same time, but we are struggling. So it's not easy for us. Luckily, the EU is helping us in this endeavor, in the sense that we have an unprecedented amount of funding, of money, which is available for all kinds of projects, most of them renewable, either through the Just Transition Fund or through the regional operational program. So a lot of money which we can use to modernize ourselves and to uplift ourselves or segments of our society from poverty. So huge opportunity, and the window of opportunity is mostly located this year. I just would like, John, you as moderator, please stop me when you think that, I've gone too much over my time. But before you do that, one last thing I would like to maybe say. One phenomenon, and actually one area in which we have seen significant progress in Romania last year, specifically in the context of the energy crisis, is the installation of megawatts by the prosumers. So imagine that we had no prosumers, let's say 5 years ago at all. And at the end of August, let's say we had 20,000 prosumers. And in 4 months, so September, October, November, December, we end the year with 40,000 prosumers. So that means 20,000 prosumers added in just 4 months. So this has been staggering and phenomenal. And we have something now close to 420 megawatts of installed capacity only by the prosumers. And very interesting, this has been the only area which have seen additions of new power generation capacities, so at the micro level, and we have not seen this addition of capacity new coming from the big projects. They were announced, some of them are ongoing or will be realized, but these smaller investments paid off and came to the market faster. And actually are the ones contributing so far to Romania achieving the 2030 renewable targets. And I think this will be a trend that will continue in the same vein. Although, just to put things in perspective, the Romanian government and the Romanian state and the way it devises, let's say, calls for applications and in the way to which it accesses the funding available, including EU funding, definitely favors the state-owned energy companies. So most of the money in the way these programs are designed goes to state-owned energy companies, because they have to finally modernize in order to be able to survive in this new market. And there is a neglect of this micro investments, but this is catching up and things are changing, because it's the people, actually, the citizens. 96% of these prosumers are private citizens, so not companies. Only 4% are companies. And this prosumer phenomenon in Romania has been entirely solar panel driven. So
Evgenia, can I ask you, because this is very interesting, what you're saying in a way agrees with the analysis of the think tank Ember in London, which found that there was a 1/5 leap in renewable electricity production in Europe last year, which it attributes to the war in Ukraine, but that 2/3 of the solar component of that increase came from, as you say, prosumers across Europe. What is the Romanian government, how active is the Romanian government in installing net metering Because I imagine that is a related, issue. You can have people who politically are pushing for energy independence and clean energy, but you surely need to have the state also put in the infrastructure.
Well, the short answer would be that the Romanian state is falling behind its initial target. It has revised the calendar, so now we should have this smart metering completed by 2027, 2028. So as compared to the initial calendar, you remember it was by the end of 2018. So the Romanian state is planning to use money available through the European funds, for instance, through this Sustainable Development Program, national program, and it has a dedicated access in which the distribution companies are the only eligible ones that they can attract money with projects to accelerate the installation of smart meters in order to be able to integrate the prosumers. But the Romanian state did not think about the prosumers too much until now, and this is mostly driven by the initiative of the private citizens who were absolutely scared to see the price increases last year. So they all rushed to do something on their own and not to wait for the state to provide, the big solutions, coming from the large electricity projects.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I've made a note of things to discuss at the end, not destroying the market through state intervention, the gas field development, which in a way is parallel to Exxon's exploration southeast of Crete. So we have 2 new European gas fields potentially in the region. Let me go to, let's just move south. Let's go to Bulgaria. Let's go to Slavcho Nekov, if he's there. Hello. So we were discussing earlier in the introductory remarks how Bulgaria is now set up to receive 3 billion cubic meters of gas equally from Greece and Turkey by the end of the year. Does that cover your needs as well as providing excess capacity for re-export further north towards Mr. Mikhailovich, towards Serbia and the rest of the Southeast market? And what is the status of Bulgaria's renewables market?
Right. Well, thank you very much, John. It's very nice to attend this event. I might surprise you by what I'm going to say, because honestly, gas is not the key problem in Bulgaria. Unfortunately or fortunately, but if we compare the gas consumption in Bulgaria now with what it was some 16, 17 years ago, there is 60% drop, 60% drop of the gas consumption. The Bulgarian energy sector is very stable currently, but it relies mostly on domestic coal and on nuclear. We use gas in very minor quantities when it comes to production of electricity. I have 3 messages which I want to pass in the context of our debate, and I will answer your question also about renewables in this frame. I will borrow an expression which was stated within the first panel by Dr. Elinas, who said that energy transition is linked to energy security. And this is a statement which has overall European validity, but it has very concrete dimension in South and Eastern Europe, and very particular one. And I think that the introduction by Mr. Mikhailovich was one of the illustrations in this aspect. Let me mention that this morning I hosted an event on energy where our minister stated 2 things. One is that in Southeastern Europe, we cannot talk only about national energy security. That is, if one country wants to feel safe on the energy side from point of view of energy security, this means that there is a need that all the countries around are also energy stable, because our markets are small and they're interlinked. And the second thing which he mentioned in relation to gas although I said it's not the key issue, is that Bulgaria has launched an initiative which will be formalized very soon for joint efforts in Southeastern Europe for looking for gas supplies and also for promotion of the development of the gas infrastructure. And I think that this is a very, very good and prominent approach, because we all share the overall European values when it comes to development of the energy market, but we are kind of more dependent on each other, on our neighbor, in our neighborhood, than on the overall European energy market. So this is my first message. We have to continue focusing on the regional cooperation, and we have to defend also common positions before the European Union institutions in this context, because there are very specific points which are related to the regional energy market. And this is valid not only for gas, by the way, it's also valid for the electricity development. We, by the way, profited as a country in this current situation by huge exports of electricity to the neighbors. My second message is that aside this common regional approach, which we have to look for, we have to very strongly intensify the bilateral cooperation. And here I will give the example with Greece and Bulgaria. Mr. Stambolis was a guest of ours just a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the development of the electricity networks, particularly in the context of prosumers, which you also and Ms. Guzilov referred to. In Bulgaria, this is a huge problem, and this is why we want to learn from our neighbors. And Greece is one of the examples. I'm very happy to hear that also in Romania there are very profound steps forward, because in Bulgaria this is a huge problem, and it's a problem of the development of the electricity networks. In our case, we have a huge line of renewables waiting to be connected, and they cannot be connected simply because the networks cannot accommodate them. And the prosumers issue is also very important. The government tries to do something in the parliament, although we have a very unstable political life in the country. We're going to have the 5th parliamentary elections within 2 years, which is kind of nuts, but this is a reality. So the legislative frame is missing. And from this point of view, I want to underline again my second message. We have to communicate much more on the good and best practices in this aspect, and renewables is a very good example. And the last point of which I want to make, I will come back to the statement that energy transition is linked to energy security, but firstly, it is linked to people. And let me give you one figure in Bulgaria in this context, which I heard, and I was horrified when I heard it on the 1st of December 2022. More than 2,850,000 Bulgarian citizens are jeopardized by energy poverty. And this is close to 50% of the actual population which lives on the territory of the country at this moment. And from this point of view, my last message, and this is also a message to Brussels, if I may pass so, it is very important that we move forward in reforms, but it is also very important what the effect on people is in this context. Because at the end of the day, if you recall, when they launched the Green Deal concept in Brussels, they said it is for the people. And I'm telling you, for the people, particularly in my country, this is a huge, huge problem, because the energy poverty issue is on the top of the society concerns. And here, however, I want to very strongly support what Ms. Guzilov said. We have to do all these steps. We have to take care of the market. The market is very important. The energy policy, the energy sector is not a social sector. It is a market sector. The effect, however, of the market reforms should be duly taken care of by the state, those who are in need, because and they should be properly targeted, not only those who are in need, because there were a lot of mistakes in the redistribution now of the state funds to support the business and to support people, and it was kind of not well done. Even people who have higher income were profiting from the social support. So these are my three messages: more regional look within the context of the European energy policy. Second, very strong push of the bilateral relations to learn from our experience. And last point, take care of the people. The reforms are for the people. Well, these are my three messages.
Thank you very much for that. I know that the energy transition is often blamed for energy poverty, but I wonder now whether we are confusing that with the effects of the Ukraine war, and whether the latter is not more relevant to that question. The will of so many Europeans to transition faster in reaction to the war, I think, suggests that people see renewable energy as the solution rather than the problem. But we can come back to that. Christos Dimas, shall we move south again to Greece, where partly an answer to Slavcho's point about networks, the independent power transmission operator is investing 10 billion euros over an 8-year period, well, a 10-year period up until 2030 to upgrade the connections between the islands and, well, to create connections between the islands and the mainland. This is partly to remove diesel generators from islands, which are very expensive to operate, but also partly in order to bring renewable energy to the mainland from the islands, wherever developments take place, especially wind. So that's partly an answer to what you were asking before. How can Bulgaria learn from Greece? You have to, I think Greece has started by investing in the high voltage transmission system, and now the local transmission system is trying to catch up, and there's a huge amount of work to be done there. But Christos Dimas, would you please take the floor and address these issues in Greece?
Okay, thank you, John. But let me first make a very short geopolitical walk around due to the Ukrainian war. The Ukrainian war, because I have prepared something like that. The Ukrainian war has changed dramatically the global geopolitical scene in a short period of time. Within 1 year, certain big changes took place both in Europe and worldwide. A war conflict between Russia and the West is the result, even through proxy of the West, and a clearly new Cold War between the two camps, and in general, a very unstable situation on a global scale. Severe collapse of globalization, which was the basic philosophy of the previous era. Globalization was aimed at supplying fluently the market with low prices, products and services. Today, the priority has changed. It is mainly to ensure the safe supply of the market. Suspicion and insecurity prevails today towards those who hold a privileged position in supplying the market, resulting in strong efforts and measures for less or zero reliance. In turn, this paves the way for more antagonism and animosities, especially between West and China. Escalation of the defense armaments, a tightening of the NATO alliance, and the probability of formation of new ones. Severe negative changes in the global economy and energy landscape. Even more intense geopolitical conflict between free democracies and authoritarian regimes around the world. Now, some impunity results by region. For Russia, a major inability of the country's administrative and military machine were recorded. The country lost its energy best, most reliable and biggest customer, which is Europe. The country suffered an economic blow due to the sanctions, the effect of which will be more intense in the near future. The country was deprived of the technological goods imported from the West necessary for its technology and energy sectors. A wave of questioning of leadership's choices was created inside the country. The regime became more authoritarian. It created the conditions for the further expansion of NATO towards the Russian borderland. For Europe, with the military conflict in its backyard, Europe has experienced military, economic, and energy insecurity, a restriction of the flow of Russian energy resources, high inflation, and high energy prices. Europe finds even more today its absolute dependence on USA for issues of nuclear threat and military security in general. The era of cheap energy for Europe is over, which implies a significant economic burden and a possible economic recession, even a limited one. The need for new armaments creates also a financial burden for Europe, with the most typical example that of Germany, with a spectacular increase in defense spending and the complete change of its military doctrine. It is probable that such serious crises will mature Europe and lead to decisions that favor the path of unification. Europe showed a clear determination and a quick reaction to secure its energy supply by seeking new energy sources. Suspicion of future blackmail by authoritarian regimes leads to the repatriation of industries and companies from abroad, mainly from China. For the United States of America, America seems to be, if not the winner, the least loser from this crisis, despite having to spend a lot of money to support Ukraine. The big headache of the United States remains its excessive debt, which is now getting worse. America was forced to move geopolitically from its previous position and refocus on Europe. Again, the insecurity of the supply of the market led it to take measures against the Chinese products and companies. This, together with the issue of Taiwan, led to a greater aggravation to the relations between the two countries. China is being characterized as the great future opponent, even more now that this country is making openings towards Russia. At present, and probably in the medium term, America has many possibilities to cope with such crises, provided that its internal political disputes and its political internal division will allow it. Now some general conclusions, the positive ones. The energy independence from Russia. The construction of new energy infrastructures in Europe, and the even more promotion of renewable energy sources. The measures taken by the West against monopolistic situation, especially China. The strengthening of NATO and the West in general, with the inclusion of G7 countries and other free democracies, and the clear political distinguish from authoritarian regimes. As a negative result is the confrontation, the war, within Europe with all the negative consequences. A solution to Ukraine war with some realistic compromise should be sought. A realistic compromise which will send the message of the unacceptable invasion of Ukraine, but will not destabilize Russia. The perpetuation of the war and the destabilization of Russia must be avoided. Certainly, at the end, Ukraine should be a free, independent and democratic country. Finally, the main future global conflict will be the economic field. At the moment, in favor of the United States and the rest of the West is the technological and services sectors, and of China, the industrial one. The winner in this field will be the future geopolitical leader. For Europe, there is an important role to play by forming a strategy to minimize, to limit a future bipolar world consequences between USA and China. That was John. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christos Dimas, for your opening remarks. I think a lot of issues raised there. Russia versus renewables, the supremacy of the United States in this war over both Europe and Russia, if I may put it that way, the need for the European Union to mature, and not only politically, but also in terms of finding energy resources, and the tightening of the NATO alliance, I think stand out for me as the most immediately relevant points here. Kirilo Budanov, the head of Ukraine's military intelligence, has been giving interviews around the war, the anniversary of the war, saying essentially the same thing, that the spring is going to be a decisive battle and that it will determine whether Ukraine manages to win the war this year, which is its political and military goal. When the Ukrainians say win, they mean taking the Crimea as well as the Donbass. So when we have this discussion 6 months from now, we'll see where we are again. Could I go back around our speakers for reactions to what everybody has said regarding the war in Ukraine? Because we're not really having a technical discussion. We're having more of a political discussion at the end of the day. So yes, I see that Slavcho wants to go first.
Well,
you want to, let's do one more round of quick remarks, reacting to each other.
I honestly, I was a little bit surprised that we should talk so much about politics. I'm not a politician, and I'll link politics to energy. Just to give an example with something which concerns Bulgaria and the issue of nuclear. Recently, there was a debate at highest EU level. I'm talking about the European Council. And one of the issues was about the next package of sanctions, expanding also to fuel, to nuclear fuel, and to nuclear issues. And our country opposed that because this affects very much our energy security. In Bulgaria, about close to 40% of the electricity is produced on the ground of nuclear. And it's not only about the nuclear fuel, it's also about the maintenance of the technology which we have, which is not the case in Romania, for example, because they have different type of reactors. They have Candu, if I'm not wrong. So this brings again the point of defending the national interests the way we see them. We heard something, a different approach from Mr. Mikhailovich about Serbia and their relations with Russia. So our official policy is a NATO policy. There was also reference to NATO. We are a NATO member. we also condemn this war and so on and so on. But when it comes to practicalities about energy security issues, we have to note first the issue about nuclear, second the issue about oil. We have Lukoil refinery in Bulgaria. And these are the realities. And my message is, yes, there is a lot of politics. Yes, we are against the war, but there are realities here. And we have to also take care of them because they affect the life of all the people.
Yeah.
So this is my reaction.
Although, if I understand correctly, Bulgaria is in the process of repossessing the assets of the Lukoil share of the refinery.
Well, there are debates on that. There are several laws in the parliament and several considerations, but it's at political level, it's a mess, let me put it this way.
Right.
But these are the realities.
Let me ask Mr. Mikhailovich, because you're the political outlier here, let's be honest. Everyone else is, a member of NATO. And everyone else sees the energy as well as the geopolitical landscape in Southeast Europe changing through the process of this war. Where do you see Serbia, energy-wise and politically, at the end of this war? One of the slides you showed us earlier said that remaining on an EU accession path is at the core of Serbian politics for the last 20 years. So there seems to be a bit of a conflict there between cultural identity, but also where Bulgaria sees itself in the future. Might this war be accelerating that future?
Talking about Serbia, I assume.
Excuse me, Serbia.
Bulgaria and Romania, they are still part of European Union and still part of NATO. And if I remember quite well, the Romania and Bulgaria became a part of NATO and the EU in some, let's say, in a colloquial word, in an expressway in comparing with Balkan countries except Croatia and Slovenia. I'm talking about the Western Balkan countries. That's the one thing. The second thing, if you just mentioned that I'm being more political than energy-wise in my discussion, in my presentation, I would like to tell you that the mentioning of our people in our parliamentary dialogue, in every information outlet, we are considering the war in Ukraine is provoked war. It's not war started last year. That clash in Ukraine started much earlier. Let's say first time at 2004. After that, in 2014, with some military intervention, you remember the Maidan scandals, and then after that, the problems with the Donbas people who've been under the pressure of Ukrainian government. That's the one thing. The second thing. Our situation in political way, it's a pretty in a tricky situation. We proclaimed ourselves like a former Yugoslavia, pretty neutral, pretty non-aligned, pretty in military way also neutral, and we are trying to keep our sovereignty up to the situation which is still in a survival mode, let's say. In a new dividing of the world, which I'm not believing, the new piece of line, or let's say the new the new curtain between East and West, because the new dividing of cultural differences, let's say, between liberal capitalism and, let's say, collective society like the others are on the East, or between some sort of mercantilism against spiritualism, or against some sort of tradition in comparing against individualism, which is the individualism and human rights are on the top of all of Western culture. So that clash is still trying, and as I heard, you are mentioning that there is a synonym: global North, global South. What it means? Could somebody explain me? Global that, global that. And the one more point is that sanctions against Russia is imposed by 42 countries all over the world, in comparing with 140 or 150 countries of United Nations didn't impose the sanctions to Russia. This is a way of thinking. I'm not going to say that the global South is on a Russian side, but they are thinking about their situation with sovereignty, with their situation with a national, let's say, in a colloquial, national pride or whatever, to keep their tradition, their family values, their values which are not comparable with the values on the Western world.
Yeah, I
Just generally.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but I'm also hearing you drawing very stark lines of confrontation: East versus West, the rich North versus the deprived South. And I think that with respect to Serbia, the picture may be more complicated than that, because we had your president in Alexandroupoli at the inauguration of the Alexandroupoli FSRU last year saying, I'm definitely interested in buying gas from here. We had Russia requesting ammunition from Serbia. Serbia is not supplying it. We also had the greatly increased interest in the European Commission in reviving the process of absorbing the Western Balkans into the EU after a very long period of stagnation, I think in reaction partly to the pandemic economic crisis, but now, of course, even more so because of Ukraine. So the rhetoric on the part of Europe has changed. So I think,
the Serbia is trying to keep a good relationship with all of neighbors, including Greece, for sure, because as you know, the Greece didn't recognize Kosovo. That's a main point for the Greece is understand the Serbian position. Like Cyprus, Greece, Romania didn't recognize the Kosovo, and those points are make us still that we are on the right side, let's say, right side of history, whatever.
So this is a geopolitical discussion, and I really like the point that Slavko Nekov made earlier, that in this neighborhood of small countries, we are all interdependent when it comes to energy markets, at least. It reminds me of something my father once said to an American when he tried to explain how small the Balkan countries are. He said, when we buy a gun license, when we apply for a gun license, we apply to the neighboring country, because if you fire a gun, the bullet travels across international borders.
It's good.
I appreciate your point, Slavko. But since this is a geopolitical discussion, and let's say we are looking at our neighborhood as one region, Greece is trying to play a major geopolitical role by building pipelines, gas pipelines, north to Bulgaria, shortly to North Macedonia, more LNG import stations. And now we have the electricity interconnectors starting up, beginning with the Kopelouzos project to Egypt. But there are two more, which are European projects of common interest. Can you not, Mr. Mikhailovich, see a future in which Serbia buys its energy from the south, coming up from Greece, produces more of its own renewable energy, buys more from Romania, which is rapidly transitioning to renewables? Can that not be the geopolitical future of Serbia?
Okay, I understand your point. First of all, we are interested to make a diversification of the routes of supplying gas, supplying electricity in any case, whatever. First of all, our president, Mr. Vučić, been in Alexandroupolis, and he made some sort of, let's say, not agreement, but just idea that Serbia is maybe next customer of buying LNG from Alexandroupolis position. And the second pipeline, which is connecting us and Bulgaria, is going to be finished on the end of this year and beginning to be operational at the beginning 2024. That's an interconnector between towns of Niš and Sofia. And that pipeline is going to be a survival pipeline if something is happened to the Turk Stream or to Balkan Stream. As you know, we are pretty sensitive after the Nord Stream sabotage that something is going to happen maybe on a Turk Stream. And we are thinking about that. Not only we are in Serbia, but in Hungary, who is also supplying to the same pipeline. The new project which I've seen, the Romania is making a deal, some sort of deal with Azerbaijan and making under the Black Sea cable to connect green energy from Azerbaijan to the export to Europe, preferably to Romania and Hungary, then we are part in some way of that project too. The third one, as you know, the similar to Bulgarians, the Hungarian people, Hungarian state have also some deal, and they made an agreement not today, not last year, but years before, for a new installation of two huge nuclear reactors near to Budapest called PAX 2, in comparing with the PAX 1, which is already working. And both power stations are based on Russian technology. And our politicians negotiate with the Hungarian politicians in order that Serbia can get like a 10-15% of that new installations of nuclear energy, because we are quite well in a flexible energy, but we need a future-based energy in order to replace our coal-based power stations.
That's all very interesting. And since you've introduced all of these very interesting interconnections, electricity cable from Azerbaijan, importing nuclear electricity from Hungary, and the Sofia-Niš gas pipeline, let me also ask Evgenia Gusilova, is Romania interested in this pipeline carrying oil north from Alexandroupoli to Burgas to Constanța, potentially, which the energy ministers of Greece and Bulgaria discussed at the INA annual conference last autumn?
I don't know what to tell you, honestly, because there's been interest towards this project for a long time, but maybe there will be some renewed interest in the current context. I'm skeptical about it. So if you ask me, I'm skeptical about it. But the Romanian government has a long tradition of carrying projects from various policy documents, carrying them over years after years after years, and not prioritizing and not actually making a selection of what kind of projects are really the ones that matter for Romania. So, or there have been projects that Romania has labeled as very important strategic, and they haven't happened. And other projects without this label actually went ahead and materialized. So when it comes to Romania, it's very difficult for me to tell you, you know, where exactly or how much the, let's say, the stated rhetoric corresponds to the real interest of the market participants.
Right.
Sometimes it coincides, but I would say mostly not. I would go a little bit to the intro to our discussion, even the geopolitical background. And I would say that, yes, it is true what Mr. Mihailovic stressed, that the global south did not adhere to the sanctions imposed by the West to Ukraine. And it's regrettable. And I think it's because the global south falls back on this Cold War mindset and perspective in which they saw Russia as an alternative to the West, and they want a multipolar world. So they want Russia to be an attractive pole and a counterbalance to the United States and the West. But I think that's outdated, and the Global South will have to update its framework through which it views the world and the relationships. I mean, it's not difficult to inform yourself of what is going on in this conflict. It's been the most mediatized war, I think, ever.
Yes.
And we should not confuse things. There's nothing to confuse. We don't see Ukrainian missiles hitting Russian towns or killing Russian residents in peaceful buildings. It's Russian missiles killing Ukrainian citizens. So things are not shady or gray. They're pretty straightforward there.
Yeah. I think we need to wrap up because it's now 1:15. Do I see a hand raised from Mr. Yigit? Yes. Would you like to? And let's make this,
I have a question regarding in the past. I was asked as an advisor and consultant to help to build a DC cable from Romania to Turkey's coast to bring the access energy from the renewables from Romania to Turkey. Now I hear Romania needs access energy from Azerbaijan and Georgia to come over. So it's a little bit confusing for me. What change? Is it really that much demand for it? And the other issue is regarding the Burgas-Alexandroupolis pipeline. I was quite supportive of it. Even we developed the BTC pipeline at those days because there is huge volumes of oil is coming to the from the Caspian to the Black Sea, and this is passing through the Bosphorus. Still, the Kazakh oil is passing through the Bosphorus. So to reduce it, more Caspian gas needs to be consumed in the Black Sea region because the new development was presented to save the Bosphorus, and most of the tankers going northward are empty. So this is my question.
So you're asking, what's the point of importing energy in whatever form from further afield when there is energy going unused in the Black Sea? This is what is that? Do I understand you correctly?
On the oil side, there is still excess oil arriving from the Caspian to the Black Sea.
Yeah.
So, since now there is a reverse development of Alexandroupolis-Burgas pipeline, I said, is there such a need in the Black Sea? In the past, we were all working hard to bypass Bosporus, bringing the Caspian oil and gas somehow to the Mediterranean. So this confuses me a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody want to answer that question?
Yes.
Evgenia is waving her hand. Yep.
Just very briefly, you are correct when you say that there was this project to build an underwater sea cable carrying electricity, but not from Romania to Turkey, but not from renewables, because we didn't have that many renewables. It was related to our projects for Unit 3 and 4 of the nuclear power plant, the Chernavod, which we had very big trouble to materialize, and we still don't, it's not, construction is not underway, but Romania did not give up on those projects either. And then there was, yes, the price differential, which would have helped. I mean, the electricity was lower than lower in Romania than in Turkey. But then Turkey got tired of waiting on Romania and went ahead with its own nuclear projects. And I think it's great that you did that, because you see things don't move at the speed that they should in Romania. As far as to this new underwater electricity cable is concerned, I think this is more, I do not perceive this as a project lobbied for by Romania. I think this has more to do with the fact that the European Commission has available funding for it and is willing to provide financing for out-of-the-box solutions to energy security. Because if you look at what is going on in Romania, we have many announced projects and we will see additions to renewable capacity in the coming years, quite significant. So, and then we have this replacement of coal with gas. So I think this has more to do with the EU pushing us from behind for the diversification and strengthening energy security than necessarily with the Romania's, strong desire to have this cable. But you should take into account the fact that Romania has an obsession with Azerbaijan. And I think in this bilateral relationship, Romania-Azerbaijan, it is Romania that's more interested in Azerbaijan than is Azerbaijan in Romania,
John?
I think we need to wrap up the discussion just purely for reasons of time, because it's a very interesting discussion.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think that a very important question is not for this session, but in future is to somehow to study how we're going to supply Ukraine with energy. This is in future, this is a very important issue, and maybe this is the answer for all these projects like the Alexandroupolis-Burgas or the connection between Azerbaijan and Romania, etc. That was my...
Okay, that's a very good point, because we're not really thinking about the day after the war. We're thinking about how the war is going to end, and that's a very good point to remember. But to wrap up, I'd like to ask each of our four speakers to just answer one simple question. How do you think this war is going to end? And what will that mean for the energy supply of the region? Why don't we start with Evgenia Gusilova?
Tough one, because it's very risky to launch any predictions regarding this war, which has had so many wildcards and so many surprises since it started, and the way things have gone. I mean, surprises in terms of how Russia would perform, surprises in terms of how fast Ukraine will be conquered or will fall. I think the Ukrainians' resistance has been one of the biggest surprises, and their resilience and willingness to fight and die for their country. I think that's the biggest surprise. So it's a hard one to tell. I think everyone wishes for this to be over. We don't need this in the region. Nobody needs this. We want development. We need development. We need to modernize our grids, our infrastructure. And I think Russia needs development too. So this is something utterly useless and senseless. But in terms of how we'll come out, on the other side of this, I think we will be strong. It has already made the energy market stronger. And it forced us to cooperate faster, and it pushed us, forward, because it's the circumstance of such a nature that we had to do unprecedented things, and this will actually speed up, and in the medium and long term will bring us closer to what we want, to what the EU wants for us: climate neutrality, less pollution. So in that regard, I think this for the energy markets, once all the hardships will be behind, the outcome will be good for us and for the region.
I notice you're not venturing to guess who is going to win, but I take your point. Interconnectedness will increase. Do you agree, Slavcho Nevkov?
Well, when it comes to the war part of your question, I'm not an expert in this. I know quite well Ukraine due to other reasons, particularly in the context of their energy sector, and also I know a lot of people, and I think I know a little bit more about the mentality. The problem with the war is that I think that there are a lot of things first which we are not aware of. when it comes to the insights of the war. And the worst part of it is that Ukraine, in my view, is Ukrainian infrastructure, including the energy infrastructure, is so much damaged, and it lost so many people that the process of recovery will be very complex one. The good issue in this relation is that, particularly in the frame of the energy community, there is already concrete mechanism of donors funding and concrete support, but it's more focused on what is going on currently. What will happen further, we definitely need a Marshall Plan type.
Yeah.
When it comes to the energy security issue, I think that there was something positive, and I agree with Ms. Guzilov, the energy world changed. We completely, in Bulgaria, got rid of the gas dependence on Russia, which was linked with pipelines which pass Ukraine. And this is to a very big extent also due to our good cooperation with Turkey and with Greece in concrete. So the positive part of this is also the boom of new technologies and renewables. This is when it comes to energy security. I think that the world in general, Europe in concrete, and Southeastern Europe in particular, made and is making the best of what is possible. But what will happen? I agree with the question of Mr. Dimas. We have to really think of the reversing the energy flow towards Ukraine after the war. How it will work, I don't know.
Mr. Dimas, let's go to you. Will Alexandroupoli and the interconnectors, gas and electricity, will they play this great geopolitical role in rebuilding Ukraine?
Yes, fully agree to that. And this is what they have in their mind, both Brussels and Washington, for promoting all these projects. As far as concerns your question about the Ukrainian war, I think that the possibilities now are in favor of a continuous war. That's why it should be compromised. And the leading role in this, in all this negotiation and discussion should be from European Union. Europe has a lot of interest to find an end in this Ukrainian war. So I have not seen something like that right now, and we have to think, not forget that there are a lot of very aggressive voices against Russia that is not helping a lot the whole case. So Russia must not be humiliated, must not be destabilized with this war. But the message should be clear. Ukraine is an independent, democratic, and free country. This is my...
Good. I don't think anyone can humiliate Russia more than Russia is humiliating itself. But we keep coming back to this point, and I think there's no danger of Russia being humiliated by anyone else. Let's go for these. Mr. Mikhailovich.
My message in regard to war, please organize our, let's say, world community in order to make a ceasefire and to stop the war in a position almost right now. I don't know who is the negotiator. Those are leaders from European Union, which are, for me or for our public opinion, is not enough capable to do that right now. Maybe the Turkish President Erdogan have a negotiating capacity, maybe Chinese. They proposed these days 12 suggestions how to end war in Ukraine. Generally, I would like to, first of all, to try to world community push both sides, or all including sides in that war, including a West, including the East, in order to find a solution. This is the one thing. The second thing is that in terms of energy, I think that the proven technology, which we are already running our systems, let's say, producing electricity, is going to be still in the next few years, still give us enough security to keep our energy system quite well. But we need huge reforms in energy market, rules, energy market things in a region or on a European level generally, and we have to make our interconnectivity more capable, and to be with a more solidarity, with a more understanding in terms of Southeastern Europe.
Thank you very much. And if I may summarize your collective predictions for the post-war environment: more interconnectedness, more new technology, northbound energy flows towards Ukraine, and reforms in energy markets, and a Marshall Plan for Ukraine. Does that sound fair? I think that's the main predictions. Thank you very much for your time, for your energy, for your ideas. We greatly appreciate your presence here today.
Thank you for leading us.
Thank you, sir.